The story of the selfish giant. Once upon a time, the children of a little village used to go and play in a beautiful garden. It had soft green grass and colorful flowers. There were many trees where the birds perched and sweetly sang. The garden was said to belong to a giant, but no one ever saw him. Generations of children played in the garden, but then, one day, the giant returned, and he found his garden full of children playing.
"What are you doing here?"
he asked in a gruff voice. The children were scared and ran away.
"This garden is mine, and only I can play in it,"
the giant said to himself. So he decided to build a big wooden wall around the garden and put a notice board where it was written,
"No trespassers."
The poor children now had nowhere to play. They just wandered around the garden's wall, remembering how much fun they had had in the past as the giant was enjoying the garden inside all by himself.
"It's so nice to have this beautiful garden just for myself," he thought. "I can do whatever I want, and I don't have to share it with anybody."
The giant was enjoying himself, while every child in the village was feeling miserable. What a selfish giant he was. But as the days passed, the giant began to notice that the grass was no longer green, the flowers were pale, the trees didn't blossom, and the birds were no longer singing in the garden. The giant kept playing in there all by himself, but he eventually grew tired of the grayness and loneliness and decided to sleep for a while and dream about how once his garden was green and beautiful. When suddenly the giant awoke to the sound of music and laughter. The children had crept in through a little hole in the wall and decided to play in the garden while the giant was asleep. The grass was green again, and the garden was full of flowers, and the birds were happily singing. It was a wonderful sight. Yet, when the children saw that the giant was awake, they quickly ran back through the hole in the wall. The garden became gray again, and the birds flew away.
"My garden is telling me how selfish I have been,"
the giant thought. So he grabbed a big axe and knocked down the entire wall surrounding the garden. The children who were just outside became even more frightened. They thought the giant was coming after them, so they quickly ran in every direction. The giant stretched out his enormous hand and grabbed a terrified little boy. But then the giant gently placed him onto a tree branch. Immediately the tree burst into blossom once again, and the birds came and sang there. And the little boy stretched out his 2 arms, flung them around the giant's neck, and kissed him on the cheek. When they saw that the giant was no longer wicked and selfish, all the children came running back to the garden, and in truth, the garden never looked more beautiful.
"It is your garden now, little children," said the giant.
"Come on and play with us," the children shouted, and so he did. And the giant never felt happier. The end.